Hello, welcome to assignment number 5. The first thing you want to do is download your SketchUp extensions, and you also want to download your AutoCAD base and your LU5 components. So once you download those, you will have those in your downloads. It might take some time to download the plugins. It's a pretty large file, but it'll give you all the extensions or plugins. I'm using them as synonyms. They're now extensions in SketchUp. They used to be called plugins. You'll have everything that I have. Some of them are paid for, and they'll prompt you for payment. We'll delete those, or you can delete them, or decide to pay for them if you want. Most of them will be free, and we'll go through the process of kind of cleaning that up and showing you how to install those too. So once you have these downloaded, what you want to do is double click in here, go into the plugins, double click. You want to do Control A. Oops. Control C for copy. Then you want to navigate to this file directory, and it's going to be your C users, whatever your name is, app data roaming SketchUp, and you should see the SketchUp 2021 folder. You want to go into SketchUp, you want to go into plugins, and then just do a Control V for paste. It's copying a lot of files, so it might take a little bit of time. As it goes through this, what it'll ask you to do is to replace the ones that are existing. You want to skip that because the ones that are here are the newest version of whatever I have in my folder. So just skip that. Yeah. Before, when I did this, and when I kind of went through this in rehearsal, it took about 5 minutes, so I might skip this part of the video, but we'll see. I'll turn up the music just in case I decide to leave it on. Alright, so here a report will say skip these files. Alright, so now that's done, turn the music back down. We'll close out of this and we'll open up SketchUp. Oops. And we'll open up SketchUp. We'll open up the standard. Okay, so you'll have these things. Don't freak out. This is just some of the plugins or extensions that we're trying to load that just have issues, or they're timed out, or they were paid for. So we'll fix that. So we'll say OK. And I don't need all these. We'll close most of these out. I will keep texture position. I like that one. And I'll keep self scan. Use it a lot. What's up here too? Okay. Now I want to manage some of these plugins because some of them are just not working. So there's about 9 that can be managed. I'm just going to go update and step through these. So this will update all these. Yes, update all of them. I don't know if it did it or not. Update. Let's try again. I'm just being impatient. Okay, so they're all updated. That's awesome. And I just know that the placemaker is causing a problem too. So I'm going to look for placemaker, and I'm just going to uninstall that. And uninstall the Sketch OSM. Okay. Cool. now I want to file and save as template, and then you can call this your standard. Call it standard LA template. And just say save. Boom. Now I want to close this out, because when I close it out, it'll save all of these properties, and every time I open up SketchUp after this, I'm going to have to do all that again. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to go back into SketchUp. Standard LA template. I'm going to click on that. Hopefully we get no errors. I'm still getting some errors from Scalp Translator, from Scalp, it looks like, and it's not going to hurt us, but we'll just want to keep it clean. So looks like Scalp is the big one, and Twin Motion. And is there anything else? That I think that's it. So I'll do one more management just to kind of keep this clean, so that it doesn't keep popping up and annoying you. So I'm gonna go to manage again. I'm gonna look for Scalp. These are just plugins again that you can download again yourself or play with, but things that are causing issues now, so that I'll uninstall them. And also Twin Motion Direct, which we don't need. Good application, but we don't need that for right now, especially if it's causing issues. And just okay, cool. So now what we'll do is that we will begin. Hopefully next time we start SketchUp, and we'll find out here shortly, it won't load with those errors. So now what we want to do is we want to go to turn off my profiles. Don't need dashes on either. I am going to show you a cool thing. This is a new feature. SketchUp keeps on evolving, and SketchUp will always be my first love. It was the first thing I learned how to model on. I mean, they have some cool features, but it doesn't allow us to create construction documents yet. It's just not as sophisticated as Vectorworks for what we're trying to do for information modeling, though it is very powerful and can be used with certain extensions, but not natively. So what I'm going to do is show you something else they have. They've just started called Start Pre-Design. And what Start Pre-Design is, it's a really cool new feature that allows you to do a study area. And I'll do, this is where I grew up. Oop, yeah, that's a little road. Okay. And I will say 6434. That's a road. Okay. So I'll do this, and then I'll say continue. Your analysis will usually be filtered by the schedule, so let's say create study, and we'll see what happens. So when we click on this, it's going to give us some general information about the area, right? So it tells you the different times of year and the different temperatures, kind of these different ranges, architectural responses to these. I'm assuming these temperatures and these responses to this different area. So it gives you some base information, glazing rate. This is more for architecture, but it gives you some information, some interesting information about the site pretty quickly, which is helpful. And this is kind of speaking to what the future of information modeling is, where even from the beginning we're starting with an intelligent design or something that's informed. This is pretty generic, but still it gives you some base information, especially the architectural response, that can be very useful in a presentation to help you begin to understand what's going on, at least with the climate. So, yeah, now you have that, and you can subsequently print this thing off, I believe. Well, so you can change Unitan to language as well. Can you print? Let's see. Control P, there you go, and actually print those pieces off. So yeah, so anyway, that's how you would do that. And let's go back to SketchUp. So now what I want to do is they'll jump into the assignment, and what I want to do is go File, Import, and I'm going to import that AutoCAD base, and I have AutoCAD here listed. so I can see it. I'm going to say import. Allow it to come in. There we go. Go here, I'm just going to double click in this and delete the information I don't need. You can also isolate your layers in AutoCAD and just export the information that you're working on. I'm going to outside click that. I'm going to click here, double click here, it's still in that. So I'm going to click here and right click and say explode once, so I can just get that out of that kind of shell and have it to move freely. So I'm going to move this over closer to my center axis and closer to this figure. And I'm going to double check my scale and hit T for tape measure and make sure that this is 5 feet. Looks like it's 5 feet. And I'm going to move her over, my scale figure person. And that looks good to me. Oh, she's floating. She's below the surface. We'll fix that because there's no surface yet. Easy to fix. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the layers, and layers are referred to as tags. So all the layers that you had in AutoCAD were then transferred over. And I'm going to turn off all of the plant layers because we're going to work on the surface first. I'm also going to right click and delete this tag because there's nothing else on there anymore, and just delete entities. That's what the CAD block pieces were on that we deleted earlier. And flat work, I am actually going to, that we drafted all of that on. All right, I'm going to have that and leave that alone for a second. And I have my stone pavers as well. I'm going to keep those separate for a moment so that I can do some quick texture painting in here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is when I have that loaded, I am going to highlight everything, and I'm going to say extensions, and I'm going to go to my Dynascape and say run CAD cleanup. So all these faces should be made, which is great. My faces are blue, which is indicating for me it's a back face. I want to right click and reverse face, and then right click again and say orient faces to this so that it's facing up. And this is important for more rendering applications rather than in SketchUp. And now what I'm going to do is start texturing this thing. So to get textures in SketchUp, there's different ways. There's already some that come with the library that are generic that you can use. You can be found here and go to like landscaping. You can play with these and look through these different pieces. And they're pretty good. You can use these. Typically, folks pick their own textures. And to do that, and I want you to do that for this assignment, you would just go and type in grass seamless texture. This would pop up. I'm going to go to my images and make sure it's seamless. No, there's no watermark or anything on it. I'm going to right click, save image as, and I've already downloaded some of these images and put them in my textures, but I would drop it here, save it, and in SketchUp I am going to create a new texture. So I'm just going to click on any of these things, right? It doesn't really matter. It could be a color. I'm going to do pick a color, which just makes it easier for me. I'm going to pick a color, and just the first thing that I see, and then I'm going to click this plus button, create material, and I'm going to navigate then to my downloads. This is where I put my texture, and grass 1:1 scale. Say OK, and I believe that grass was just out there. I'm going to zoom in, and that looks right to me. I'm going to create another texture, and I'm going to go to my concrete, and this is again, you would do it again to show you. I would just look up seamless concrete, so this time it would be concrete seamless texture. This looks good to me. I'm going to right click and say save image as. You would save it here to JPEG in this instance. When I go back to SketchUp, I'm going to navigate to that, say OK, and this is going to be that primary concrete that we have everywhere except those papers that we're kind of beginning to paint that we see. And I can go ahead and turn those on too so that we can see them. Tags, and actually turn on those papers so that we can see. And those will actually be different. I'm going to paint this color as well. There we go. Next thing I want to do back in my materials, and if you don't see your default tray, you should be able to go to your Windows and default tray and hide or rename and be able to show it. What I'm going to do now is do the mulch. So I'm going to click the plus and I'm going to click here. Then I'm going to go to mulch, save them. And 1 to 1 looks good right now. I'm going to click here. It looks a little small, so I can edit this. You can edit the scale of these things. I'm going to make it just 3 feet. Yeah, so I can see it a little bit better. I'm also going to make it a little darker, maybe. Yeah, it's a little bit darker. That looks good. Okay. Alright. Bam. Also, I'm just going to turn on use sun for shading to brighten this up so I can see it, especially as I start putting plants and stuff down. So I just have my shadows on and use sun for shading. Back to my materials. This is looking good. I think then this is a mulch area as well. Now I am going to actually go back to that concrete layer that we created. I see it here. I'm going to right click or actually just hit that plus again to duplicate this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it in a similar way. It's going to be a different texture because I created a new material, but I'm just going to make it darker and say okay. And then that's going to give me kind of this nice fill for this piece here, and just quickly jump through painting these, kind of like painting by numbers. Alright. Up in the color, and we also have the ability to change this this color after we put it down, and even modify the texture if we wanted to, if we felt like we wanted to represent it a little bit differently. So it gives you a lot of versatility within SketchUp to be able to do this, which is always a nice thing when you're designing, because things tend to change and not remain static. So just kind of clicking through this material, like, I don't know if I can say really quickly, but pretty quickly. It's not taking forever. Every click. Alright, just kind of clicking through. So now you know how to use the materials paintbrush or paint bucket. So now I have that, and I have that kind of material separate, and I have a kind of a nice base. Now I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to make this all the same bench. I'm just going to hit E for the eraser and delete these lines. I'm going to double click, right click, and make it a group in this instance. Double click, and I'm going to push up and extrude 1.5 feet with the foot marker, enter. And I'm just going to, I don't need these faces here that were generated from that pull from the paver. And that's cool for me. That's good. Now these are going to be railroad ties, so I'm actually going to make this into a component. Component axis here. Say create. Double click. This one does not need the face camera because this is actually a real piece of static, a 3D object that we're making. So I'm going to raise that a little bit, and then I'm going to copy. I'm going to click here, and then M for move. And when I hold Control, it allows me to copy it. It turns into a plus. So I hold it and let go, and it allows me to copy that object. I'm going to bring it over. And again, the benefit of having a component is that when I make one change, it changes to the other thing. So what I'm going to do is also find a texture. This will be fun. Just a rusty, like a rusty iron texture, rusty steel. You can find anything you want, just try to make sure it's seamless. I've downloaded one already, and what I'm going to do is create a new material, navigate to rusty iron, old trusty rusty. come in here and drop this. I hit Control A to make sure I'm selecting everything, and then drop the color in. And then it should be painted on both pieces. If you see me navigate, I also have a device called the 3D Connection Mouse, 3D CONNEXION. Highly recommend it if you're doing a lot of 3D modeling, which you probably will be in your career. So a very, very, very nice tool which allows you to kind of spin around these models quickly and useful. So I have this base done, and I'm going to bring in next this steel kind of screen. So I'm going to go, this is the first time I'm also going to begin to use my my components. So I'm going to actually bring this in and say File Import, and I'm going to navigate to those components that we downloaded and make sure I have a SketchUp file on, and I'm going to look for that stainless steel screen trellis. So I'm going to say Import. This should drop in. I'm just going to drop it right kind of here on the edge. Now this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it'll look like I'm going to the center. I'm going to grab that midpoint, and I'm going to look for that midpoint here in my object along this line. Boom. Looks like I found it. There. So that's the marker for that. And what I'm going to do then is just delete that line. I don't need it anymore. It's just a reference for us to drop this piece in. Now, if we needed to rotate this, I could click on this and use the rotate tool. Make sure that I'm on a flat plane, and then click to where you want it to be and click the other side. And then you can rotate this thing where you want. But we don't need to. We're lined up pretty well. So that's the second piece. I want to also make sure now that I'm hitting Control S to save this thing, right? So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to my downloads and LU5, and I'll just call this my model. LU5 model. All right. And now we'll tackle the plant material. So for the plant material for this, we're going to start kind of one by one. I'm going to go back to my tags, and we'll start at 1. So 1 is going to be these trees that we see now, and we're going to put those, we're going to call these Zelkovas. We're going to call these Zelkovas. So I'm just going to rename this. Well, actually, we don't even need to rename it. We'll leave it like this and just know it as a reference. So plant 1 will be Zelkova. So I'm going to go into my folder, to my downloads, wherever you have your components at that you've downloaded. And I'm going to look for that Zelkova. And I'm going to double click on this file. And it'll open up another SketchUp window for you. And you'll see a Zelkova. Now I'll click on this. And what I want to do is I want to click on it and Control C, copy. And I'm going to come back to my other model. And then I'm going to Control V to drop this thing in. Okay. I'm going to kind of position it. I have my move tool, and I'm grabbing them in the center. I'm trying to center it with that object that I have here, my other object. Now I'm going to click on this. I'm going to hit Control X to cut. I'm going to double click and kind of open that window into this component, and I'm going to edit, paste in place, Control Shift V. Oh, zoom out a little bit. If it does that, it just jumped out. And then click away. And what it's done is it's dropped that into that component and put it everywhere. All right. It looks like it might be shifted just a little bit. So I'm going to double click on this to open it up and just move it over a little bit. There we go. So it looks pretty good, pretty aligned. So we have that. That's nice. So that's our first object. Also, now that we have a surface, we can drop our person to it. So I'm going to click on her and right click and say drop GC. This is one of your extensions. This is not native. This just came with the extensions you just installed. So I can drop her and she drops to the surface. So then we have those trees, and it's looking pretty good so far. I'm going to hit Control S to save. It is your friend. I'm going to turn off that as I work. I'm going to go to plant number 2. Now, let me talk about these plants a little bit though. We're using very simple 2D face me plants. So if I go to the top plane, you realize they're just very super. They're just a shell. They're just a silhouette, rather, or outline of a tree. They're not true 3D objects. You can also embed true 3D objects, but they get very, very heavy inside your 3D models. And for doing conceptual work, they're not really necessary. And you can accomplish really high-end renderings by using proxies, and we'll do that in a later section. But for this particular exercise, we're just using these very simple outlines of photorealistic plant material to give some type of representation of what we would put into this design. So then number two is going to be what? Is going to be our, I'm trying to orient myself so I remember what these things actually are as well and get them right. And these let me turn everything on to get myself a frame of reference. So these are going to be our auto loop and laurels. So I'm going to turn off 3. I'm on number 2. And these are going to be our auto loop and laurels. So we're actually going to skip those right now. Those are going to be special. I'm going to type that in and call this autos. And we'll come back to that to show you how to create excuse me, these individual symbols if you ever want to create one for yourself, if you ever need to come back to SketchUp. So we're going to go to number 3, and number 3 then is our Ilex attenuatas, and those are going to be our Foster Hollies, I believe, and I am going to navigate to the folder and open up my Ilex attenuatas. Double click. It should open it up. And then also I'll close the other one that I don't need, the other old Zelkova file. Let's come back to that and just close that. We don't need that anymore. I'll come back here to this. It's running away. I'll come here and I'll, same thing, Control C. I'll come back to my other file, or other file, and then I'll Control V, drop this thing in, and kind of position it. And bring it to the center point. That looks about right to me. And then I'm going to Control X again and I'm going to double click and put it inside this, right? And then edit, paste in place, and there we go. So now we have all those. Now we have all these in place as well. The next thing we're going to do is number 4. And number 4 are these right in the front, and these are going to be my jpeg Holly, I believe, and these are going to be the Eupatorium purpureum. Eupatorium purpureum. If I'm murdering that, I apologize. I am not a plants guy, but I love them. I love them. Just the scientific names have always baffled me. So here we are. So I'm going to put this in, and same practice. And this time I'm just going to open it up over this one so we don't duplicate all these files. We'll go File, Open. And we're going to navigate to our downloads into that folder again, and we're going to go into those components and Eupatorium purpureum. There you go. Beautiful. So now I'm going to take that and I'm going to Control C, copy that again, and then just, you know the deal. You got it by now. Double click, Control V, and I'm just going to drop that one in a different way. Just paste it in, put it in the center. Kind of click out, and we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. Okay, those do look a little bit big in scale to me. So I'm going to double click and just Control A if this happens, and it is because you're using the same file. So hit Scale. I'm using that, looking for that top box, and then I'm going to hold Shift so it shrinks Escape. All I want is just this plant. So when you go in here, make sure this is not selected, just this. Hit Scale, and again that top, just that top piece, and then kind of come down and just bring it down just a little bit. There we go. That's more appropriate. I'm going to keep going now, and I'm going to do plant number 5. And plant number 5 is going to be our Ilex famatoras. And we're going to, same deal, go here, and open. So Ilex's, and no. And I'm going to Control C this. And I can do this because these are already components. If this was loose geometry, this would not work. So I'm going to go back here to my file, and as a reference, that method worked pretty good this time. I'm going to double click and try to Control V into this. Okay. And they look a little bit big, so I'm going to scale that same way. Yeah, that looks good to me. Alright. Control S because it's your friend. And next plant, plant 6. And this one is going to be the Hamlin, I believe, the Pennisetum Hamlin. Pennisetum alcoporides Hamlin. And I remember this one. And what I'm going to do is the same thing. Go back to this one, open. Look for Hamlin. Did we see it? Pennisetum Hamlin. Open that guy up. There we go. Control C. Come back. Control V. Drop that in. And it is coming over big, so I'm going to scale that and come down, holding that shift, and just make them much smaller. Alright, and just try to get that in the center of that. Escape. There we go. Keep it going. Now we're looking for the last plant, and that last plant is going to be our, what are they? And I believe that's our Autolucan Laurel. So how do we make these? This was pretty quick to put these things in, hopefully, and not painful, hopefully. But we have another one. What is this? So those are our autos. What are these guys then? Plants, what is plant 7? We did skip one. Let's see what that is. What do we have here? North winds. Okay. Well, let's bring in our north winds. Forgot a plant. Open. Then we'll come back and do those Autolucan Laurels. So I'll grab these north winds. Let's say open. Grab this plant. Control C. And come back to our model. And that is what these will be. These will be north winds. So I'll come here, and it worked before, so I'll keep it going. Put that in. And it is there, obviously big, so I'm going to scale this. Have it come down to a reasonable size. And call that my north winds. So it's coming together, and now, last but certainly not least, we need to do our Autolucan Laurels, So how do we do this? How do we create these plants? How do we create any of these kind of really quick images? So this is how we do that. You're going to navigate, and we're going to type in, this time, a cherry laurel or auto. Obviously, I've been practicing Laurel-Lucan picture, so look for a good clean picture. Typically, you can go to tools and size and try large. Sometimes it does limit your selection, though, so be careful with this. And what I found that looked decent to me was this picture here. Several of the pictures, but this is one of them. So I'm going to go right-click and save image as, and it's a JPEG, so I need that. Autolucan Laurel is fine. I'm using it as a reference. I'm going to say save. So I'm going to come back to this and come here. And I'm going to go File, Import, from my downloads. Where did I put that thing? In here in Textures. Make sure that you have your images on. You're not going to see it. So make sure all supported image types are selected. Let me go to that Autolucan. I'm going to say Import. I'm going to click and just kind of drag out. I'm also going to make sure that I want my views. I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to say views. Should have put that up earlier too. It's nice to have. I'm going to have my front view on. I'm going to make sure also my camera is in parallel projection where there's no perspective. I can still pan. I'm panning by holding that middle click button and my shift together. So you need a mouse. You need to be working with a mouse. And now what I want to do is kind of trace the outline of this and make this an object that we can rotate around. So what I'm going to do is then right click on here. I'm going to explode this. And also I'm going to hit the transparency in my X-ray. And if you don't see that, again, that's styles. And it just allows you to see your trace line a little bit better. So I'm going to click here and go to freehand. I'm going to zoom in, and you can do this with your art tool too, but I find this easier to do freehand. And kind of trace, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I kind of trace the outline of this plant. I mean, you can do this with trees, you can do this with people, statues, anything really that you see that you want to add into your model. So very, very powerful. You can do similar things and even do some of this line work too in Photoshop. So very powerful for kind of storytelling and getting your idea, especially if it's something that is difficult to 3D model. You can just kind of create these face me objects that you can still embed and kick out in renderings and even in video. But 3D objects are very nice. And as things become faster and better, everything will be. But right now, this is a nice way of kind of stitching things together. And also, as you build these pieces, if you go this route, and we're going to use a software that kind of comes with the built-in plant library, but if you go this route, you can actually build your own pieces and save them and create your own custom plant library, which is nice. Okay. Alright, so hopefully you have a face in here. Looks like I have an extra line that I don't need right there. I saw I crossed over, so I'm just going to delete these extra lines. If you don't have a face, it's because you have a break in your line. Your lines need to be, everything needs to be connected in order for you to have a face. You can use an extension called Tools, Edge Tools, and say Find Edge Gaps. I have it set as a shortcut, Control E, and it'll help you find any areas that might have some problems, like these little things like this that can cause issues. So make sure it's a face. I'm going to double click on the outer face and then make Shift G, which is my shortcut for make group, and just delete that so I don't need that. And then double click in here and then right click, and I'll make this a component, and always face camera. Make sure replace selection with component is demarked or checked. Set component access, that's going to be my center. Double click and say create. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that we are actually in the right position. Should be, but just want to make sure. Well, actually, yeah, I can even grab it here. You can save this thing up for your library, but since we've created it and we're going to drop it into our other file, it's really not necessary. But if you want to, you can save it. I'm going to Control C this and actually just come back to this file, and we're going to drop this thing in. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to say Control V for paste, and it looks like it's close to the right size too, which is nice. I'm going to move it so it's below ground a little bit right there. And I hit M and hit up the up arrow to kind of lock that Z axis to go straight up and down. It looks about right, so I'm going to Control X that and edit Control Shift V or paste in place. That looks like a pretty good size to me. I like that. Okay. So now I've kind of created my garden hopefully pretty painlessly. What you can do now is you have the ability to turn on your shadows, for instance, to kind of cast shadow. I'm going to make this, my light's not so dark so I can kind of see in here. But different times of the day, different times of the year to kind of cast and see how things are playing out in your site. And again, these 2D objects make this a lot easier in order for them to process and render these pieces so we can kind of get a sense of what's going on. You can take images from this and also run it through filters. Additionally, we can make the plant materials look a little bit more realistic by varying the size. And you can do this quickly with a plugin that you should have now. So I'm going to click on one, I'm going to say Instances. This is also another plugin. I'm going to say Select All. And then I'm going to go to Extensions, and I'm going to go to Chris Fulmer, and I'm going to go to Scale and Rotate Multiple, and I'm going to say Randomly. And I'm going to put the minimum scale factor because I don't want them to change too much in size. I don't want to get them too much smaller, so I'm going to make it 0.98. But maybe they get a little bit bigger. I'm going to make that like 1.3. This is a healthy soil. I'm going to say okay. And what happens is they just shift a little bit in size and makes it look a little bit more natural. So it's not all the same plant, though it is all the same plant. And go to the next one, do the same thing, instances, select all. And I'm going to say this Chris Fulmer, scale and rotate multiple randomly. And again, I don't want to get too much smaller, maybe 0.95 this time. And then still the 1.3 works for me. And maybe that was too big. Try that again. So I already selected. Control Z is still your friend. And I'm going to go randomly. And then 0.98. And then just maybe 1.2. That's better. Alright. And these little guys out here. It'll be more impactful out here. Chris Fulmer. Scale and rotate multiple randomly. And 0.98, so I don't want to get too small. And I'm going to get these at 1.3. Yeah. That looks good. And then some of these north winds in here. Instances, select all. You can also use this technique in plant materials too to actually get specific plants and test them together pretty easily. Extension, Chris Fulmer. I'm gonna get this last one, instances, select all, just varying them a little bit. Yeah, that's okay. All right, and then my trees, I think, are my last thing. Is these Zelkovas. Select all, extension, and then I'm going to boom. Forgot already that fast. Randomly. Again, I don't like to get them that small. For this. All right. So now we have a scene, and what you can do is you can take pictures of this thing. So there's different ways of doing this. We can talk about styles again. We're on a simple style. I'm on select right now. Let me go select. They also come with different styles that you can use that are built in. You can create your own. You can download tons of these. You can take pictures just from this. You can also do things like turn the edges off and make it look more realistic because you don't see edges in real life. But in this instance, since we didn't depress these, it's hard because you can't see the score joints. So I'm going to keep that on. I want to see that actually. But you can also do these things with different styles. So let me go to select and just play with some different styles. So maybe we do a sketchy style. I don't even want to do a sketchy style. Let's do hand drafted with mask. What does that look like? Ooh, don't like that one. That's kind of cool. All right, that's kind of cool. Can't really see anything though. So you can kind of play with these different things. Maybe there's some default styles. This is kind of the basic ones that we have. I don't want photo modeling though. Sketchy edges. Let's see if they have. That's kind of interesting. So these different pieces that you can do. So back in the day, we used to take these and then print them out and then hand render over top of them. And some people, I'm sure, still do. Rendering software is getting so sophisticated now, you don't really need to do this, but you can kind of play with different styles. I'm going to go back to my default styles and just go back to, what am I going to go back to? That's a landscape architecture style. Shaded with textures, that looks good to me. So what I'm going to do for this is, once you have an image, is you can go File, and then Export. You can go 2D Graphic, and kick out the image. You want to make it decent. So that's good. It's plenty. Better quality. That's fine. I'm going to put it here and just say image 1. Kick that out, and maybe you get a different angle from a different side. Maybe it's you kind of zooming in. It's like a, like right there with you, girl. I got you. I feel you. It's beautiful, isn't it? And I'm going to do another picture. I'm going to say File, Export, 2D Graphic. I'm going to say Image 2. Boom. You can add people and add other pieces to this too, and even add somebody sitting down if you wanted to. You can play with different component pieces. To do that, just to show you, you can load it here through 3D Warehouse. I recommend that you go to 3D Warehouse here, 3D Warehouse here, and look for your elements. So person sitting, potentially, right? So you can get a person sitting, and these are 3D people, and actually download them, because I can show you the process. So we'll download this person. We'll download 2019, even though we're working 2021. I'm going to open this one up. Again, 3D objects just are heavier, but this will give you a demonstration of how you can use them. Whoa. Looks like it's been a rough day. So I'm going to grab this person anyway. And they are a 2D face me. That's cool. So I'm going to grab this person, and this is actually running from a proxy, I believe, from a rendering engine called Rocket 3D that uses a 2D simple image, but will actually render this in a high resolution 3D image. And again, we'll look at those things later on. So I'm going to come over here and borrow their person and kind of drop this thing in, and kind of let him sit down, but then he's not rotating, so I don't really want that. I'm going to Control Z that to go back. I want to find somebody else. Person sitting. How about to say sitting? Podium. And you don't want to get lost forever doing these things. These libraries are super extensive, and there's tons of things in it, but we can kind of click through a little bit just to kind of show you. And maybe we'll try one of those podium renders and see if it works better. So I'm going to download that. Try to download this podium. Open it up. And this time we'll make sure that it's a component for us anyway, and we'll just do it appropriately, and we won't have the arrow on it either. Yeah, I like that one. So we'll take these folks, and okay. I'm going to double click, and I'm going to make this, again, a component, and always face camera, set component access like I have been doing, create, and just copy this, and bring it back to my model. And just Control V it to paste it, and kind of get these folks now sitting. Kind of got to be careful how you situate these and where you take your images at or your photos, but with a little bit of playing around, you can get it to work. Alright, so maybe these folks are sitting here on this edge. Yeah, and maybe they are levitating just a little bit, but these kids are special. So I'm going to take another picture just that, because I took the time to put it here. File. And if you needed to scale these, again, you can always scale to kind of get them to be more appropriate. Maybe they're a little bit bigger. Alright. And File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'm going to say Image 3. Alright. And that is all you need to do for this. You also have the ability to jump into a program called Layout, but since we're going to Vectorworks, I won't show you that. There are videos, and you can jump into that, and this is an awesome software. I would encourage you all to explore, but this is what you need to produce for this assignment. Hope it wasn't too painful. If you have any questions, let me know.